My name is William Altman. I'm a principal cybersecurity consultant at CyberCube. And today I'm here to provide a threat landscape update specifically for brokers. CyberCube spends a lot of time looking into what threat actors are capable of, what they've done in the past, and we also think a lot about what they're going to do in the future. We bring these insights programmatically to our clients on a consistent basis. And we really think nowadays it's more important than ever for these insights to make their way onto the desks of brokers. You play such an important role in the cyber insurance ecosystem. To understand where the threats are coming from and how they impact your clients is only going to make you more successful and contribute to your bottom line. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into a little bit of what we have for you today. We're going to start out by taking a look at the cyber threat landscape from an insurance view. So for starters, we know that emerging threats that were once not that big of a deal are now actually systemic issues. And the main one here is really ransomware, but specifically ransomware as a service. This idea of crime as a service stemming directly from software as a service, in which you have threat actors that are capable of writing the base code for a type of ransomware and then distributing that code out to multiple affiliates so they can go out and scale the attack. This is what's really driving the number of losses that we see today across cyber insurance. In fact, claims are beginning to outpace premiums earned, and the ratio of losses to premiums is jeopardizing future profitability. This chart here from S&P Global Market Intelligence and HX Analytics shows us just that. What's more is that you can see during 2018, but really like into 2019 and towards the end of 2019, you can see that loss ratio curve really hits the hockey stick type growth. It's just up and to the right. What's happening around that same time in the threat landscape is that cyber threat actors, and namely the ransomware as a service actors, have scaled their operations. They really figured out all the different kinks that were needed to be ironed out to get a fully fledged crime as a service operation up and running, and they've done it. And around the end of 2019, we started to see some of the more prolific gangs emerge, and that really increased this loss ratio that we see here. So that's a bit of the cyber threat landscape from an insurance view. But what does this mean for brokers? And more importantly, what does this mean for your clients? Well, it means that your carriers are going to be delivering you more and more arduous security questionnaires. As every new attack elucidates new potential attack vectors, the carriers are essentially playing whack-a-mole, and they're either offering new exclusions, higher premiums, or just other ways of making your life and your clients' lives more difficult. And understanding the threat landscape from the carrier's view and how that impacts the pressure they're going to put on you and your clients is really therefore more essential than ever before. And that's really more of the rationale behind why we're giving this threat briefing exclusively for brokers. Let's start talking about nation-state cyber threats. Nation-state cyber threats are often referred to as APTs, or advanced persistent threats. And these threats are rising in both frequency and severity. APTs are known to have the resources, the skills, and the time to really focus on their targets, to the extent that they can really integrate cyber offensive capabilities with normal national security agendas. That means merging the full spectrum of intelligence gathering activities with cyber offense. We should expect a lot of activity from these groups in 2022. They're mostly going to be compromising specific adversaries that are going to be related to their national security agendas. But these are also going to come in the form of espionage and intelligence campaigns for the most part. That being said, both SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange, if you recall, those attacks were APT-led attacks that were largely espionage attacks, but they resulted in lots of collateral damage for hundreds and thousands of companies and government agencies. So even though we're talking about nation-state threats here, enterprises are not safe. This is just a sample image here from Microsoft showing us some of those advanced persistent threat actors that are relatively more active today, and that could pose a threat to businesses in the future. And these are also the groups that we're keeping an eye on in 2022. So, what should brokers do in the face of nation state threats? How can we actually advise our clients in the face of this growing threat landscape? Well, the reality is that most companies cannot defend against an advanced persistent threat actor. That given the right amount of time, energy, and resources, there's just no amount of security that can defeat that type of a threat. So we turn to damage mitigation. How can your clients increase their resilience in the face of these threats and then demonstrate that resilience to carriers? Well, you can start off with data backup and recovery solutions. Finding the right way to back up your data is easier said than done, but having that in place and having those backup and recovery solutions in place can really be the difference in the event of a data breach or a ransomware attack specifically. You'll also want to think about redundant hosting technologies. We know that businesses are also at risk of experiencing contingent interruptions due to the failure of critical business resources, such as cloud providers, content delivery network providers, domain name services providers, and more. So if you can establish some redundant hosting across your cloud, DNS, and CDN environments, you can be more equipped to avoid that unplanned downtime in the event that one of those technologies goes offline. There's more that companies can do to be resilient in the face of sophisticated cyber threats. And if you're a broker who's interested in advising your clients on how to protect themselves against these threats on that path towards insurability, CyberCube's here to help. Just reach out to us. We can always provide more information about what we're thinking about and what we've seen be successful in this regard. Now, let's turn to the criminal cyber threat update. No surprise here that ransomware is really the most critical cyber criminal threat today. And ransomware threat actors are evolving and innovating rapidly. They learn from each other's leaked playbooks, and their chances of success really increase with each subsequent attack. So we're looking at a situation here where ransomware is not going away. It's something that's been around now for almost a decade, or really even since the 80s, actually, so much longer, but in an attack ready kind of way with real losses, I would say it's been around for about a decade. I mean, you can see pre-2016, just based on our sampling of attacks gathered here, ransomware was pretty nascent. 2017, we started to see large-scale attacks like WannaCry, NotPetya take down some larger organizations like Maersk and FedEx. But then after that, 2018 and 2019, we really saw a lull in the amount of ransomware activity taking place. And this is largely because that is the time period, as I mentioned before, when threat actors were really tooling up to establish ransomware as a service gangs. And once that took hold in 2020 and 2021, you can see clearly here, even just based on this sampling, that the size of the companies hit and the number of companies hit are both increasing exponentially every year. This is not slowing down. In fact, it's only getting worse. So, what can brokers do in the face of ransomware? Well, there's a lot. There's probably a lot more than is featured on this slide today, but these are some of the more important points that I want to communicate and get across, and that, again, we're always willing to engage more on and talk to you more on if you reach out to us. So communicate to your clients the appropriate limits to purchase for preparing to mitigate the damages of all cyber attacks, including ransomware. You can do this using CyberCube's Broking Manager solution today. And then using the right analytics and tool sets for calculating conditional losses around ransomware, trying to communicate to your clients that if this were to be a real event, if this were to actually occur, not only could this cost you X amount of money in total, but you could also be communicating the actual individual cost drivers that are going to lead to the amount of losses you can see in the event of ransomware. This is, again, going to help your clients prepare and bolster some of their weak points. Our products are also capable of drilling down to those types of losses and costs for having this limit purchasing conversation. Look to partners for identifying ransomware-specific security risks on the company's network. This is going to be a huge benefit to your clients if you can equip them with the types of things that carriers are going to notice in that path to insurability. So if you can flag for them that they have specific known vulnerabilities on their network that ransomware gangs have been known to compromise, these are ransomware vulnerabilities, carriers are flagging this today. We also know that ransomware threat actors tend to break into networks through what are called remote connectivity solutions. Things like Microsoft's RDP port, stands for Remote Desktop Protocol, and also virtual private networks or VPNs. These are all potential network entry points for good guys, but also for bad guys. So flagging where these remote connectivity solutions are present on the network and demonstrating that there's at least some awareness for the threat that they pose and some added security on top of them could go a long way to reassuring those carriers that you, your client, is insurable. So really discuss this stuff with your clients before carriers bring it up in renewal discussions and before it impacts insurability. This is the future of your industry, being hands-on, giving your clients that white glove approach so that when they get to that renewal, it's not an awkward conversation about how either their premium, their limit's gone way up, or they just can't get insurance. The whole point here is to engage with them early, to prep them for what they're going to experience in the conversation with the carrier. So let's think about now some of our predictions for this year when it comes to what the cyber threat landscape could bring and what brokers need to know. I'll have you know that CyberCube thinks about this a lot. We have a lot of different predictions for what could happen in the first 3, 6, 8, and 12 months into the future. This is one prediction that we think is top of mind for the entire industry today. It's also top of mind for us, so we want brokers to be aware of it as well. Single point of failure, or SPOF, supply chain attacks. These are attacks in which one technology is used as a way to spread an attack to many different entities. It's kind of like the one-to-many angle, and it's completely out of the bag for threat actors today. So the number of SPOF attacks involving widely used software has increased. We've seen this just over the past year and a half with some attacks that I recently mentioned: SolarWinds, Microsoft Exchange, Kaseya VSA, even Log4j could be considered somewhat of a SPOF attack. It's really a preferred method for those nation-state or APT threat actors that I spoke about previously. It's going to enable them to conduct those widespread espionage campaigns that they're really interested in. But we should also expect ransomware threat actors to start targeting software supply chain single points of failure. We saw this with Kaseya VSA. To some extent, we saw it with Colonial Pipeline as well. We're likely to see it again in the future. So the heightened targeting of SPOF by ransomware gangs really suggests that these attacks are going to become more frequent and more severe. They're only going to become more important in the eyes of carriers, and the carriers are going to want to look to the brokers and to the insureds for preventing this type of a loss on their account. This is just one sampling of those SPOF supply chain attacks since January 2020 all the way through July 2021. You can see here a mix of APT groups having global and regional impact. But the idea here is that these attacks aren't slowing down. They're getting more myriad and more diverse. And for us to be able to combat them and really understand what's going on here, we need to understand a little bit more context. And some of that context is that you have, again, really sophisticated APTs, such as the Russian APT that conducted SolarWinds, that are not getting caught. They're not stopping. They're just finding new and clever ways to carry out these attacks. We're also in a world in which there are more software vulnerabilities that go reported and unreported than ever before. And this is a record for the 5th straight year. So there's more software, which could increase the amount of vulnerabilities seen, but it just underscores the potential that attackers have to compromise our key business critical assets. So what can brokers do in the face of this mounting threat? Well, carriers today are acutely aware of the losses that can stem from insecure supply chains. So Brokers need to be able to communicate the importance of supply chain security to their clients. You should be able to focus your client's attention on their third-party software vendors, as well as any open source software that they might be utilizing in their network. All of this really boils down to one idea: to encouraging clients to adopt what's called a software bill of materials. That way, they can present this to their carrier and demonstrate that they're on top of what's called the identify stage of security. If you look at all the different steps that are needed to create a really good secure network, the very first one is identify. Can you even identify the assets that you have on your network that are in need of protection? Part of that is going to be your third-party suppliers, your supply chain. And if you can't map that out and understand the risk that each supplier poses to your network, the carrier is going to come after you and say, look, we're not entirely sure you're protected against this threat. That's going to have an impact on your insurability. So there's more we can do at CyberCube to equip brokers with the tools that are necessary to uncover all the assets on their clients' networks, communicate that to their clients, and help them get a better picture of what's really happening and what's really susceptible to these types of threats. That being said, that really brings us to our time today. I hope everyone found this briefing insightful, and I look forward to sharing more threat level insights with brokers in the very near future. Thanks again.